I'm Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and you are listening to episode 1061 of No BS Job Search Advice Radio. And today's show actually stems from an interview I did for my other show, Job Search Radio. And it's going to be the last show in my series about career change. It is a 30-minute interview that I did with Michelle Clarke, a professional consultant who lives in Chile. She's South African, moved there herself, and speaks from the experience of doing a career change and also an international move as well. So she's a really interesting person to listen to. Hope you find this show helpful, and if you're interested in my coaching you, either advance to the very end or wait until the very end. I have information there about how I can help you as a coach. And if we aren't connected on LinkedIn, send a connection request to me at linkedin.com/IN/the Big Game Hunter. Again, this is derived from Job Search Radio at a time where I was doing 30-minute interviews with people weekly at the beginning of the history of the show. So now, let's get going.
And you know, I have combed the world to find people for the show. I've had people on from India, from Australia, but this is my first guest from South America. I think you will love Michelle Clarke as we talk about career change, which is one of the hardest things people have to go through as part of their overall careers. Somehow or other, people get stuck or feel stuck, and changing careers is hard for them. So Michelle and I spend time with one another going through the different ways of approaching that decision and making the right choice. So hang in there, enjoy the show. She's in Chile as we talk, and sing along with me.
Are you looking for a new job or interested in leveling up? Job Search Radio is your go-to resource for insider tips on job hunting and growing your career. Here's your host, Jeff Altman.
So my guest on this show is Michelle Clarke. Michelle does high-impact leadership, executive, and expatriate coaching for people worldwide. She works with high-impact individuals, C-suite executives, managing directors, executives, expatriates, and executive coaches. Michelle, welcome to Job Search Radio. Great to have you on board.
Thanks so much for having me, Jeff. I'm delighted to be here. I'm thrilled to be sharing with you and with your listeners today.
Thank you. So we're going to be talking about changing careers. And if there's one thing I know about, I don't care whether it's a senior individual, what have you, but when people are asked to do something different, like changing careers, it evokes all sorts of fear in them. How do you start working with someone and dealing with their issue of fear? Because obviously there are a million ways to do it, but in general, I'm sure you have a tendency as to how you start off in supporting people with dealing with that fear of change.
Indeed, Jeff, and I think you used the operative word there, which is support. I think people need to recognize that fear is such a natural consequence of any change. And the fear comes from feeling a little fuzzy about what the future is like. And I like to congratulate my clients when they feel fuzzy. I think that's a really creative place to be in, that sense of I don't know, I'm fuzzy, I don't have a clear picture. I think is an excellent place to start to mine our inner resources for what is it that's generating the fear and what is it that we need to move beyond the fear.
Gotcha. So we're starting to deal with the apprehension, the fear, as you will. And the people that you work with are generally people who project fearlessness. After all, they are fierce, they are successful, they have gotten a certain level of achievement so far. This has to be a different emotion for them, I would imagine.
Sure. It's the emotion of vulnerability. And, one thing I want to say is that career change is almost a given. If we have a look at the current statistics of the world at work at the moment, we're being told that most of us are going to have between 3 to 4 career changes in a lifetime. So the initial career change is probably the most vulnerable, and learning to get fit to that may occur again and yet again and yet again, because that's what the 21st century is requiring of us now.
So do people come to you having an idea of what they want to do, or are they just at that stage in life where they've hit overload and have decided, I got to get out of this, and they really don't have a sense of what to do next?
It could be for a variety of reasons. Some of it could be for general dissatisfaction in the work they're in. Some of it may be unfortunate in that they didn't bring upon the career change themselves. So it could be downsizing, a redundancy, retrenchment, and people are forced into a new career, and it could be retirement, and people are not feeling young enough to retire, and so they now need to start generating new ideas for a new career. Many people have some kind of an idea, because over our lifetime people have said, oh, you'll be great at this, have you ever tried that? But most often it's not a very concrete idea. People have a distant image, and my preference is not to spend the initial part of an engagement exploring that image, but rather spending the time exploring the person. And
perfect. So with that in mind, how should someone really begin? Well, when you and they start trying to figure out what's next, where should they start off with, or where should you start with them?
Okay, so really a career change, like any life change, is something that we'd call a transition. People are shifting their identity. Most of us are very attached to our identity. When we ask somebody, what do you do, we generally talk about our career or our rank. And so we need to help people to figure out who is it that they are when they are not that identity. So we start an uncovering process, and it's really the process of self-identification, self-awareness. Jeff, you'd be familiar with the iceberg model, I'm sure, which says that most of us are only projecting a certain percentage of ourselves into the world, and below that are beliefs, convictions, cultures, ideas. And it's sitting in a great place of subconsciousness. So we want to bring all of that to the surface. We want to help an individual to drop the water level line, so to speak, so they can start understanding in a much more articulate way who it is that they are, so they can start to create an image of who it is they want to be in the next chapter.
Gotcha. So in doing that, how do they uncover this? I understand the model, but my audience may not.
Okay. One of my favorite tools is what we call values identification. Many of us have values that are very dear to us. These are, they're like light posts. They direct us in making our decisions. And very often we assume that our values are those of our family when we grew up, or even our cultural values. And what I want to do is help the clients to identify what their values are in the present. So if I were to say to you, what are your values? People may say honesty and integrity. But when we start really delving into identifying values, we may discover freedom or self-expression are more valuable. For this, I use a really simple exercise. To some, it's simple. It's a document with at least 50 values listed on it. And it's a list I give to my clients between coaching conversations. And I ask them to reduce this list of 50 odd words down to 5. And doing
that must be so hard for them.
It is, and of course it's truly valuable, because people are having to weigh up within themselves what each word means. Some words may include others. And of course, I'm not accepting if they just come back and share with me, oh, my word is financial freedom. I want a definition. I want the person's dictionary definition of what does that word mean to them. How can that word show up for them? What stops them from expressing that word fully? So it becomes a really valuable self-awareness tool.
It's funny, in job search, when I'm engaged in that process with people, I'll ask them what's most important to them in the next job or organization. What will they need to see or hear to believe it's a good choice for them?
Right.
I'll ask them, most of the time they'll say happiness. Oh, I want to be happy.
Sure.
And of course, that's the word I disregard. Because the only reason I would investigate it is if they didn't mention happiness.
Sure.
So I'll ask them to tell me, in the context of an interview, how they'll be able to identify that this option is going to be presented to them by the new employer. It sounds like your definitions process.
I love that.
So we're going to be back with more from Michelle in just a moment, but first my job search insider tip, which this is unusual for me to actually in some way have a show and the tip kind of tie into one another. But this one's about dealing with your inner critic. That voice within all of us that says, you can't do that. Impossible. You're the wrong individual. I need more education. Well, if you just try and deal with that inner critic and say to yourself, I need to be more confident, that really isn't an effective tool because, frankly, it's got a pretty loud voice, doesn't it? But if you think of your inner critic as being that part of yourself that's acting that way, that's really about a desire for safety and dealing with fear of change, as you will, you'll find that you can ask that critic a simple question. What's the issue that's causing you to try and protect me in this way? What's the uncertainty that you're feeling that's causing you to be so determined to make sure that I don't do this? And just engage in a conversation with it. You'll find that's going to be a lot more effective than getting into an argument with that voice that's playing in your head. So that's my tip for this show. I have a lot more on my website, thebiggamehunter.us. Go exploring there. There's a lot there that you can watch, listen to, or read to help you find work and to coach you to play bigger. Now let's come back to Michelle. I hope you enjoyed that one.
I thoroughly enjoyed that one. Thank you, Jeff. And I'm going to take time to squiz through the rest of your tips if they're equally as valuable.
They're there and at another site of mine, nobscoachingadvice.com. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to state the other side as well.
You bet.
So now we're starting to define the values that a person has and what's going to be important to them in that next situation that they are repositioned for. How do you take that information and support them with the next steps, and what are those steps?
I wanted to, before I talk about next steps, or perhaps they're very related, I wanted to share an example of the fear. And in fact, it is related. I worked with a client who was really keen to move cities. He wanted to, he was facing retirement and he wanted to move closer to his, the city where his kids lived in. And one of the things that was really fearful to him is that he had accumulated a lot of stuff. In the course of his career, he had invested in assets, and he had created some kind of wealth, some kind of investments. And his great fear was that in leaving the city, he would have to dispose of this stuff. And I guess that moves us into the next phase, is what do we have to dispose of in order to allow ourselves to be free to take the new steps in toward a new identity?
And it's funny that you talk about disposing of things, because there are things that we always have to exchange, or things that are at risk for us to make change. And getting that out in the open must be a wonderful process of discovery, and then measuring what their fear is of doing that.
And, actually disposing, actually allowing oneself to be, for example, financially more, if I could think of the word, you can see my hand movement, flexible. Flexible is the word. To allow oneself to be more flexible by perhaps liquidating if that's necessary, moving cities if that's necessary. So what are the material and internal goodies that we have to eliminate from our world? Those are a couple of the next steps.
And bringing those to the surface must be a lot of fun. Suddenly they start to notice the various things that are encumbering them from having the life that they want.
Quite correct. We also move into a phase that I call the research phase. And the research phase is also homework items that take place, or homework exercises that take place between meetings. And I invite people to go through the job search sites, to go through the newspapers without any voice of judgment coming in, and literally picking up those titles of jobs that sound sexy to them, those particular functions of a job that sound sexy to them without any attachment, but it's more a research of what stands out, what's attractive, what's magnetic to me. And people find that a very useful exercise because there is no great need. I encourage clients not to have a need to get a new career next week, but rather to start this deep research phase.
So in doing the research, it's just noticing what they're called to do, using newspaper advertisements or thoughts that may wander into their mind, perhaps, that you just notice what is, you seem to be drawn toward.
Correct.
Interesting.
Also, one starts to notice what language is attractive to a client and how they could use that language to reframe how they've been describing themselves in the past.
Could you give us an example of that?
I sure can. I worked with a client who had been a government official for a really long time. He moved countries and needed to find a new position where his former country's government duties were not necessarily required within the new country. So we needed to reframe how he saw himself. So during this deep research phase of just going through and reading titles, reading job descriptions, when he came on, he said, you know what, I realize actually I'm this. Actually, I'm a mover of people. Actually, I'm a team organizer. I hadn't thought about that until I saw the word. And then I thought, hey, I'm that too.
Interesting. I like that. And there's got to be some concrete things that people have to deal with because I can't imagine that every person's background is completely portable into the next career. I could be wrong, but
Sure.
I find it hard to imagine. So I'm sure there's a point where you start segueing someone into that element of it. Is there a need to dissuade people from going for the job or the career that they're eminently unqualified for? Or do you just support them in hitting their head against the wall until they learn the difference?
I sensed that you were getting towards some kind of skills development phase.
Eventually, yes.
And of course, those questions are being asked is what skills are not in your toolkit at the moment? That's also part of research is what courses look attractive to you, what jumps out for you when you're reading this column when it says these people should have these and these qualifications, what grabs you as saying, yes, I want to go and study finance, I'd love to do a course in project management. So, the skills search is part of it. So you were talking about quantifiable things, so refreshing one's CV, which is not work that I do, but I encourage my clients to seek out people who may facilitate in refreshing their CVs, rewriting their skills content. And one of the, for me, one of the critical factors is a development of personal branding.
I love that subject. And I know a lot of job hunters don't get that subject. They just don't understand why it's important to brand themselves. So I hand that subject over to you so they don't have to hear it from me yet again.
I'm not sure the angle you take, and I'm sure it's as valuable as the angle I take. For me, personal branding is really a journey within. If we are to expose ourselves, and I use the word expose in the most constructive manner, but if we're to expose ourselves to job search, to strangers that we might not know, for example, on social media or through our LinkedIn profiles, we need to be really confident about the kind of person that we are. And so personal branding is the story about ourselves that we're sharing with the world. And helping clients to love every aspect of that story, even I'm between projects at the moment, even loving that aspect of it. Or I'm about to step into a new chapter. Or I love sushi and this is how I make it on Saturday nights. So personal branding to me is a holistic approach to allowing people to see some of the best qualities that we love of ourselves. And in so doing, to gain their trust and gain their credibility, gain our credibility.
Most people I run into take, again, the concrete approach. That's purely the professional side of themselves. And they don't get that holistic side as being part of the package to show the world. That in the 21st century, unlike the 20th century, the 21st century model is clearly, I am an individual. I am the brand. And if I'm going to purely show myself as professional, I use the air quotes here, by the way, folks. If I show myself purely as the professional side, there are a lot of people who are as competent as I am in a planet as large as ours. How do we distinguish ourselves? What's the differentiator between us and those other 3 billion people that may be similarly qualified? And I agree with you. Showing that personal side of ourselves is so critical in that. So now we're going to talk about the branding side of this. How do they start tying all this together into the brand of, I'll call it the brand of me for lack of a better term for now. Awesome. The brand of me to show to the world and still attract the people professionally that they want to attract.
I'm a big advocate of the social media space being an excellent feedback loop. So I am well invested in Facebook. That very often professionals say that's not a site for me, but I am so connected with so many professionals in that space. But exposing ourselves in a way that I call developing a fitness. We want to gain feedback, affirmation by starting to share ourselves. It initially feels scary. And then we start to get fitter and fitter by committing to sharing ourselves a little bit every day, gathering feedback, engaging with that feedback. So I put people to practice personal branding and all of it, in fact, the job search, the research, the personal branding is an experiment in practice. I ask my clients how much time in every day are they planning to prepare? Are they planning to commit to this? I ask them to give me hourly, are you going to do this for an hour or an hour and a half? But people need to practice to develop this fitness. And one of the joys of coaching, as you know, is coming back into the space and being able to feed back to their accountability partner what they're learning by the whole process.
And folks, I want to make sure that you heard that word, learning, because so often with people, they have that industrial mindset that says, I can't make a mistake. Yeah, they're so trained, especially the executives are trained that if mistakes are critical, they can be career damaging. You can't make a mistake. And in point of fact, this is not your terrain. You're going to make mistakes because you just don't know this material. You don't know this experience. You're heading out into the Wild West, to use the American metaphor, and you don't have a map. You just know you have to get to California from the East Coast. And how do you get there? You're going to make some wrong turns, right? So be prepared for it and figure out what you're going to learn from that experience.
Very nice, Jeff. I love that.
Thank you. Thank you. So the things that they learn while they're experimenting here, and they take that learning and apply it going forward. Now, what do they do next? Sorry, I have to keep driving the bus in that way.
Please do. One of the other important skills, apart from technical skills that they might need to acquire, are interview skills. And I'm pretty particular, or the area of the interview skills that excite me are not so much how we are going to answer the interviewee's questions, but what questions we're going to ask during our interviews.
Ooh, I love that. So what sort of questions do you recommend?
A particular question might be, if I joined your organization and I excelled, what would that look like? What might my career path be? If I joined your organization and I'm not excelling, how will you let me know? What opportunities will you give me to improve?
I like that second one. I do a variation on the first one.
Right.
And I'll say something like, so let's say you hire me, and it's a year from now, and I haven't just done a good job. It's been a spectacular job. What would I have accomplished during that year that would cause you to think that way?
I love that. Terrific. Great perspective question.
And I like your question because I haven't posed the one about the downside yet to people. So I want to make sure that I get it correctly. Let's say you bring me on board and I'm not excelling. How are you going to let me know, and what sort of time framework for improvement might I experience?
Perfect. I love that. And that comes from, in my experience in most organizations, is that I coach executives who might come to me and say, this team member I've just employed, he's not performing. And of course, the question I'm going to ask is, when did you last have a feedback meeting? And very often the question is, we haven't done that in 12 months. And so I think it's really helpful for people to, I guess it's the added benefit that coaching offers, which is that we can influence beyond just the coaching question. So somebody who's primed to go into the interview may trigger within the interviewer this thought of, hey, it's really important to be giving my people feedback.
You betcha. We're starting to come up on the end of time with one another, and I want to make sure that we have an ample opportunity to cover additional thoughts that you have about career change. I know I've interjected a whole bunch of questions that kind of get more specifics, but, I don't want to spend 2 hours with you. As much as I'd like to, I think it's unfair to your schedule. So you're welcome. So what would you like to tell my listeners about that through my lack of skillfulness I haven't asked so far?
You have done a great job, and I thank you for helping me to think about this exciting subject, as I love to do. I think I want to congratulate anybody who is seeking a change. Change requires bravery and courage. I think it also keeps us relevant. And it's important in the 21st century that we remain relevant. So people who are taking the bold step to make a change in their lives need to be nurtured and congratulated and supported. I know that's your line of work. I'm excited to be in it too.
Thank you. Michelle, I really appreciate you making time today. How can people find out more about you and the work that you do?
Awesome. I have 2 websites that I would love people to visit. The one website is specifically focused on coaching, and people can read on that website how my clients experience working with me. That URL is www.motivcoach.com. So that's motivcoach.com. And for the other crowd of people who may be excited to know, I have started a second website specifically focused on portable careering. And this is for individuals who want to create systems that allow them to work in whatever geography they are, hopefully across the globe, and to pursue the projects wherever they are. That website URL is portablepro.me. So www.portablepro.me. And on both those websites, people will find all my social media links, and I'm very receptive to connecting with them in the social media space so that we can know each other more.
And folks, in case you haven't figured it out yet, that accent that you're hearing from Michelle is not from Brooklyn. So, where did you grow up, Michelle, and where are you living now?
I'm a South African, Jeff. I was born and raised in South Africa, rather proudly so. 2 years ago, I set out on my own portable career, and currently today you find me in Santiago de Chile.
I want to make sure people understood this was not just simply book learning from you. You had a personal experience around it.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that in.
So that's today's show. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, here are a few ways to engage with me. First of all, I just want to start by saying that I no longer do recruiting. I coach people to perform at a high level. So again, I no longer do recruiting. But if you visit my website, which is thebiggamehunter.us, and look at the tabs on the top, you'll see a menu of choices available to you. First of all, you can hire me to do a resume and or LinkedIn profile critique, interview preparation, help you with a salary negotiation, answer your questions about your job search, advise you about a decision you have to make about a job offer. Those are all there as an option. I can do a job search makeover with you, where we critique everything you've been doing in your search up until that point and come up with alternatives. If you're relatively early in your search, we can do a complete coaching program where I work with you from beginning to end in half-hour increments so it doesn't have to take a lot of time for each session. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/IN/the-big-game-hunter. Mention that you listen to the show because I love hearing from folks who like it and are interested in my help. Again, linkedin.com/IN/the-big-game-hunter. You can take my classes on Skillshare too and become a premium member for 99 cents for the first few months. I have a link in the show notes. Just follow that link, sign up, take my classes. Lastly, I want to mention to you, you can find a lot of information at thebiggamehunter.us, and at times it may seem like it's too much. So you can look at the best of my material at jobsearchcoachinghq.com, where I've curated information that you can watch, listen to, or read to help you find work more quickly. Again, that's jobsearchcoachinghq.com. I'll be back tomorrow with more, and in the meantime, I hope you have a great day. Take care.
Progressive presents Get Pumped. Inspiration to help you do insurance stuff.
Okay, time out. You're gonna let your budget be the boss of you? Take control with Progressive's Name Your Price tool. Tell us what you want to pay for car insurance, and we'll help you find options that fit your budget. Here's some music to get you pumped. Da-dong, 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 dang, dang. I hear your budget laughing at you. Oh, wait, that's just those kids laughing at me. Ignore them! Da-dong, da-dong,
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Buffalo Wild Wings loves a Cinderella story. It's the tale of the underdog, the unexpected. And by their unexpected nature, you just can't predict when one is going to happen. It makes them great, but also makes them frustrating. Because at any moment, you could miss that Cinderella sighting. Unless you're spending March at B-Dubs, the official hangout for NCAA March Madness. Here, you'll catch every second of every game. And you'll be able to look back and tell the story of the team you watched climb their way from a low seed to the champions. But only if you go to Buffalo Wild Wings. Wings, beer, sports.